Did you serve during the war?
Yes.
How did you travel to the war zone?
I floated both times. We floated after 9/11 to the Persian Gulf and the Bonhomme Richard, and then pre-Iraq invasion, we floated on the USS Boxer to Kuwait, and we hung out in Kuwait and did some training before we invaded Iraq. And then we floated back after my first deployment after 9/11 on the Bonhomme Richard. So we were on that the whole time. And then we flew back on I think it was Delta Airlines out of Kuwait City from Iraq, something like that. It was a commercial airline.
Um, was this your first experience in a foreign country? What was your first impression?
I had been to Mexico with my dad on a business trip during my senior year. So a little bit. It was kind of off the beaten path. It wasn't a tour resort. It was in Guadalajara. Growing up, my dad was in international business, so there always seemed to be foreigners around, just different people, and so I was kind of, I suppose, accustomed to that. So the nationality part of it wasn't a thing. So I think the shock value is just seeing the third world in different places and in places that aren't just commonly witnessed by most Americans.
Where were you stationed?
So after 9/11 on the Bonhomme Richard, we went to a lot. Southeast Asia, all over Southeast Asia, the Middle East, like Bahrain, Qatar, Thailand, Singapore, Guam, Africa. My unit got split up. Half of my unit went to Afghanistan, and then the other half, the side that I was on, we went to Kenya and Somalia. There's it's called Al Shabaab. They're like the Al Qaeda, but they're in Somalia, and they're always causing problems in Somalia and with the Kenyans. So we helped the Kenyan military with that, and so Africa was a cool experience. It was kind of like the jungle. There was hippos, and we had hippo watch, where at night there would be two Marines that would walk around with. I mean, I don't think we were going to stop them. It was a 9mm pistol or an M16, and you're just not going to stop a hippo because we got to see them. The things are huge, and they said they run really fast. But your whole job, if you got hippo watch, is just walking around, and you're supposed to stop the hippo if it was going to trample through where all the Marines were sleeping. But yeah, it was cool. Python, snakes, and Africa was cool to see that kind of stuff. And then on my second deployment, we floated on the USS Boxer, and we stopped at a couple places along the way. Maybe just one. It was actually a 45-day transit. We got there pretty quick. I can't remember if it was Hawaii we stopped at or what it was. But anyway, it was pretty much a beeline to Kuwait and then Iraq for a while. And then on the way back, we flew through Germany and then back to the States. So not as many visits on that deployment. That was mostly the desert,
Yeah.
Kuwait and Iraq.
What was your unit or ship named?
The Bonhomme Richard was the naval vessel, and the Boxer was the other one. And our unit was 1st Battalion, 4th Marines. We were part of the 1st Marine Division, 1st Marine Regiment. And our unit was, the motto was whatever it takes. They're the China Marines. Their logo was kind of like this Chinese dragon thing. And it was just the slogan was whatever it takes. That was just kind of the mantra. We would do the mission, well, whatever it takes.
When did your tour begin?
So right after 9/11, we deployed, and we were gone for 8 or 9 months. And then we were there before the Iraq invasion. I was at the tip of the spear. That was in March of 2003. We invaded Iraq, and it was about 9 or 10 months for that.
How big was your unit or ship?
The Bonhammer Shard and the Boxer are both large. They look like aircraft carriers, but they can't have jets, normal jets land on them like you think of an F-18, and they have the aircraft carrier like maybe you've seen in Top Gun or a movie where they land with the hook. They didn't have those. They had Harriers. They had to take off vertically, and then helicopters because we were in the helicopter infantry. So it was mainly helo-borne sort of vessel, and they had these huge amphibious vessels that would come out of this kind of berthing area of the vessel called LCACs, and we went on those a couple of times. But yeah, they look like aircraft carriers, but they're not quite as big as a legit aircraft carrier.
Alright. Tell me about your job duties.
So rifleman is just a lot of maneuvering and closing with and destroying the enemy. That's the summarized version of what the rifleman does. And then weapons is it's just the heavier weapons. There's two kinds of weapons. There's the serious heavy weapons, which is weapons company, and then there's weapons platoon, which is kind of in the middle, and that's what I was. I got most of what I did is fire direction. So I was good at math, and the Marine that can do, it's a lot of latitude and longitude, and you have a plotting board, and you are working with a forward observer and doing math, basically math problem in the midst of combat to direct mortar fire, or artillery people do it for artillery, but in the infantry, you just have mortars around you. So I did that, and whenever we weren't doing that, we became a rifleman. Most of the time, and during the deployments, it was just a team leader or a squad leader. I had for almost all of Iraq, I had a M16, M203, which is an M16 with a grenade launcher on the bottom of it. And so most of the time, that's what I was doing. It was kind of a team leader or a squad leader it's called just a rifle team.
Alright. How far were you from the front lines?
We were in the front lines in Iraq. That was it.
Did you see combat?
Yes.
Yeah, obviously. What battles were you involved in?
All of the regimental combat team Marine battles. General Mattis was my commanding officer. He was the one that went on to become the defense secretary, but he was the guy that we worked for, and we pushed all the way through. We were at the very front, and the Battle of Nasiriyah was the big first one. That's where Jessica Lynch, it was a big thing in the news back then. They got lost. They were an army unit, and they got lost in Nasiriyah, and they had to be rescued, and a bunch of stuff happened. Battle of Al Qut was a big one. Just the whole way up there, there's battles. Just every city or village, there was something going on. It just was a constant string of battles. I don't know if they named all of them. I know that the Battle of Al Qut on April 3rd was named. That one, I was there. I was interviewed by Bob Arnott from MSNBC because we had journalists attached to our unit. They rode around with us, and we had MSNBC with us. So during the Battle of Al Qut, I was interviewed by him. He was there. There was the thing going on where the Republican Guard were trying to get this Iraqi family back, and we were trying to rescue them. And Bob Arnott spoke Arabic, so he was there, and it was chaos. And then the battle of just taking Baghdad was probably, the biggest event. You take Baghdad, and that's kind of where the conventional war ended. So that was another one.
Did you ever see or hear the enemy?
Yeah. We'd get them. They would either be dead or they would be surrendering or fleeing, and you'd go into. We call them fighting holes. Other military units call them foxholes, and there they are. And we saw them before that. We saw them shooting at us. A lot of them surrendered. So, I mean, that was just a part and parcel to the whole experience was the enemy. After the conventional war, it turned into sort of a guerrilla war where it was kind of just militias, militia versus militia, militia versus the Americans. Then there was a lot of the Islamic stuff, Fedayeen, Ba'ath Party. There was all sorts of factions going on. It was complete, like the Wild West in Iraq. It was just complete chaos. The whole city of Baghdad was burning. No government, just no rules, just completely chaotic. And that you didn't always know who the enemy was, but they'd be kind of friendly during the day, and then at nighttime, they're trying to launch a RPG at you, and so you would see this kind of stuff too. It was emotionally hard to figure out who was who. Logically as well, they would rat each other out. All sorts of family feuds were being settled. You'd have one family that didn't get along, whether it was personal or business. There's all sorts of just nasty things going on amongst the Iraqis, which can happen in any culture. Hey, that guy over there, his family makes bombs and they're trying to kill you, and so they're trying to get a raid on them, and they have nothing to do with that, but they're just settling some familial problem they've had, some feud. There was all sorts of stuff like that going on. So it was just a very hairy situation. But the enemy, yeah, it went from conventional thing where they were in uniform. There was the Republican Guard and the conventional forces, which were no match for the American military. And then there was the Fedayeen, which were like the black pajamas. Those guys were the crazy ones. You wouldn't want to get captured by them. They were like, if you think of ISIS, if you remember ISIS, all the nasty stuff they were doing, that was kind of them. And then there was the Ba'ath Party, which were that was Saddam's government, Saddam Hussein. The Ba'ath Party was a socialist Arabic league that wanted to have a greater Arab, social structure and government structure. So there was all sorts of different parties, different enemies, and it was just always changing.
During all that, what did you live in?
We lived on the ground. When we invaded Iraq, we were in an Amtrak, and it's like a troop carrier, and there'd be a 50 caliber and a Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher as the turret, and then we would sit up on the top with our rifles and machine guns, and we just drove through the cities, and then whenever we would get ambushed or we were taking a city, you would get out. There would be tanks with us, the Abrams tanks, and we would follow them around. They had like a telephone on the back of the tank, and you could talk to the tank commander. But if you were taking a city, you always felt better following the tanks. So we'd walk through cities following tanks. We'd be in the Amtrak. We lived in those things. It was horrible. I mean, there was no bathroom breaks. MRE bags and bottles, and there was no stopping when you're invading a country. We lived in those, but after that, it was just on the ground, just on the ground. There was not a bed or a pillow. You have this little foam thing. It's like I can't remember what we called it. It's just a foam pad that it rolls up and you can attach it to the bottom of your pack, and then you could roll that out. But a lot of times, like literally using a rock as a head, not for the comfort, but just to kind of like elevate your head. There'd be times where you'd just be out on a satellite patrol, and you're going to go and you're going to be at this area, and you're just going to be there as a listening post, observation post at LPOP, and you'll just be there, and there's no amenities. You just find something. So it wasn't comfortable.
Tell me about your best friends or any friends.
I still talk to them today. I had some really great friends. You kind of get friendly with the whole platoon, but you can't hang out with 30 some guys all the same. So the guys I hung out with most, Harris, Fisher, Hensley, Hassett, Godley. These are the guys that were my friends. We still talk today. We met up about 3 or 4 years ago at one of our friends, one of my Marines. He had his leg blown off by an RPG, and he was struggling, and we went and kind of had a reunion at his place about 3 or 4 years ago. So we all got together, and that's the last time I've seen face to face, but I probably talk to him a couple times a year on the phone. and one of them lives in Fort Collins, Colorado. So I saw him a couple times last year at like a Marine Corps retirement ceremony for another Marine I knew.
Did you ever lose any friends?
Yeah. There was a lot. There was a lot of deaths, a lot of casualties going on during the initial invasion, and then the war changed a little bit, but it didn't stop. So yeah, there was a lot. There was 9 guys from our unit that were killed.
Did you ever think that you might not survive?
I guess so. When you're young and at that age, you don't really believe that. But most of us had like letters in case you were died, you died or you were killed, sort of letters. But no, I don't think. I mean, deep down, but it's not anything that at least I was contemplating that much. Like, that's a personal thing. It's going to be different for everybody, but